We visited my brother.
I don't remember which one this. Do you remember which one this is supposed to be plugged into for them to hear me? Well, let me ask Kathy. I'll see if she can hear me. I think it was on. I know it was on one side because it was one time on this one and it didn't work. Let's see if they can hear me. I just don't remember which one we changed it to. Can you guys hear me? I mean, I know you can hear me. Can you hear me, Heidi?
I can hear you.
Perfect. Great. All right. Awesome. We'll start in like 2 minutes. Though I'm not sure where people are. So I only know, so 2 people are on screen and 2 others are, I know are not coming. So it's 4. I'm going to take it personally because I heard it was a full house last week. I don't know where people are.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good to see you. Is Harris coming or is he also joining?
He won't be on tonight. He had to work really late, so it's just me.
5, that's fine. You're still missing a lot of people. 5, 10, 12.
Scared everybody off.
It's a poopy subject? It's a really great subject. It's God.
Very deep.
It is very deep. It's not lighthearted like last week with Pesach. I get that. Let's see if you'll be able to see. I'm going to move this closer. Well, that just means more cookies for us. So, you know, it's fine.
Right.
I'm happy to eat them all week. It's fine. Move that a little closer.
There are some more people coming in.
Great. Come on, people. We are on a time schedule.
Doesn't class go to 9:30?
I heard. I did hear about that. Yeah. Rabbi Wolf didn't tell me, but this class doesn't. Now I have to tell them, you don't read your emails. Hello, how are you?
Once I got the cookie.
Love the video. Oh my God, they were so into it last year and so into it this year.
This year was hilarious. This was very much, last year was like more structured, and this is like.
They're amazing. They're amazing. And I love the Little Mermaid, which she spread up on the dining room table. Hello, how are you?
So long day.
Megan's not gonna make it tonight.
Amanda's not coming. Megan, don't ask me why I said Amanda. Because as I said, I was like, they don't have an Amanda in this room. Oh, good. Oh, good. All right, let's give people another minute. But I will just let you know, so I did bring black and white cookies. The reason is, so they're one of my favorites. So of course I'm gonna bring something that I like, obviously. But and I know as Rabbi Walk last week taught you like about cleaning out your house, you know, so for us growing up, like right after Purim, my mom would not buy anything new. So it was like a month of dwindling down and could never have anything, you know, like new or good that I wanted. You had to like finish, you know, whatever we had. But the night before Passover, we would go out and like have ice cream or pizza or something fun. So this is my bringing you like a treat for the last week. Some treats, some sweets, something that you cannot really eat on Passover. But so bringing that to you. And whatever you don't eat, I'll be happy to eat for the week. So will the staff. I mean, you know.
They are very good.
They're really good.
They are good.
They're fresh markets. They are dairy in case that's an issue or concern for anyone, just so you know. Yeah, they're amazing. You're welcome to take them home also. Totally fine. Exactly. Because there's 4 weeks that you're not buying new stuff and then 8 days where you still can't have it. It's like Passover is like 5 weeks. I mean, let's be honest. It's like 5 weeks. Becomes a process. See, and that's why we don't have religious school the next day, because we know parents are up late at night doing that. All right, so tonight is all about God. very light topic, obviously. Clearly people didn't want to come. It's fine. All right, so we are going to be doing this. There is actually, if you went through the book, there's like a lot of great exercises for tonight that we're going to be working on. But basically what we're going to spend the time tonight is talking about this idea of like wrestling with God. Then we're going to talk about some different ways that Jewish tradition describes God. And then we're going to end with really talking about personal beliefs, personal theologies, not like it has to all be developed tonight, but just to think about it. And what is God language and how do we use it? So, so one of the interesting things is that if you read through the Hebrew prayers, God is all in the Hebrew prayers, right? Like almost every prayer mentions God at least once or talks about God. However, kind of the opposite is that in a lot of Jewish people's lives, God may not even play a role. And what I mean by that is twofold. One, sometimes people don't talk about God because they don't know what they believe about God, right? And it's hard to kind of know what you believe if you don't actually take the time to think about it. And the other is that people just don't know how to speak about God, right? So you have people who may know a lot about Judaism, and they might be observant, but God is this big subject, right? It's not black and white like the cookies. Thank you. I just made that up right now. And it's not, it's not easy like that, right? So it's a subject that takes a lot of work. It's kind of easier just to say, I observe Shabbat and I follow all the laws and not delve into what is this whole big idea about God, because it can be confusing and people don't always have the language to talk about God. So an interesting fact, there was a study done in 2013, just to kind of prove this point, of American Jews. So American Jews, 34% strongly believe in God, 38% believe but are less certain, and 28% do not believe in God. So it's a huge number in that sense who don't even believe in God. As opposed to in this survey, American Christians, so in terms of strongly believing in God, American Jews, 34%, American Christians, 79%, really big difference. Believe but are less certain, 38% Jews, 19% Christians, and this is the hugest one, do not believe in God, 28% Jews, 2% American Christians. So really like different. So although there is a belief in one God, in Judaism, people still don't necessarily, if you ask them if they believe in God, they may say no. But the best is when I have like a kid, let's say, who says they don't believe in God. And I say, okay, so tell me about the God you don't believe in. They can totally explain to you what they don't believe in and not realize that is God, right? You just are not necessarily understanding it, or it's this bigger concept. So it really is interesting when you talk to people in that sense. So what we are going to really start off with first is this text on page 114, which is God wrestling. God wrestling. So what we're going to do is just trying to see. I wanted to do this in small groups.
This is a small.
Okay. Air. I think what we'll do based on the numbers here, let's go off by fours. So Maddie will be here, 4 of you, and if you guys can come together. I'm going to write some questions on the board that I want you to think about. So when you do it, when you're taking a look at this, read it together for like understanding, read the story through for understanding. And then these are the following questions to think about. Okay. Let me put these on the board. Give me a second. I'll bring the board closer to Kathy and Heidi. Just give me a moment. Okay, so the first question is, okay, what does the fact that the Jewish people comes to be identified as Yisraelites, God wrestles, tell you about Judaism as a religion, just the fact that the Jewish people tell you about Judaism as a religion. So that is the first one. Because Yisrael means to wrestle, to struggle. Okay, the number 2 is, how do you personally relate to the idea of wrestling with God? And this idea of wrestling with God is not like a one and done. This is something that people do throughout their lives, right? Kind of depends on also where you are in your life, right? How you may feel towards God at times. And the third question is, what makes you comfortable and uncomfortable about the idea of wrestling with God? So if everyone wants to just read through the text maybe on their own, and then you can get into your group and kind of discuss these questions. We are on 114 only, correct? And these are obviously opinion questions. There's no right or wrong answer here. About the idea of wrestling with God. Okay. All right, so let's take it down a little bit so everybody can read a little and then start to answer. Let me move this a little closer. Can you see that?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Hmm?
I don't have questions about the text.
I just
But if
asked
you want
if
to
they were done resting.
You want to say answer?
Yeah, so talk, and then we're gonna also all talk a little bit about about the text, like for understanding, because it may not be clear and that's okay. And then if you're able to, try to tackle these questions as well. First, read the text for understanding and maybe ask the group, see if they can answer. And then if not, we'll come back together and talk about it. Because it's a difficult subject, right? It's a difficult subject. I think this is in Vayetse. Let me take a look. I will tell you. Give me 1 second. Let me look in the Chumash. Hold on. I'm not going to look online. Let me look in the Chumash. I think it's Vayetse. Vayetse. It's in Vayishlach.
Which is the opposite of.
Right, so this is like after the whole incident with Jacob and Esau here, right? So this is where Jacob and Esau have their confrontation. And then he is leaving. And it comes in the text. He's leaving because he had a fight with his brother. Right? Because it comes here. And God said, oh God, my father, return to your native land and I will go back with you. Jacob sent messengers ahead to his brother Esau, and that's when he was going to him. He resumes his homeward journey. Okay.
People that got involved in that
wanted a more definitive.
Hello, everybody. Hello, hello,
Well, it's always.
Guy named Constantine figured out it could really get a lot of power, we just made it official.
Well, just forming religion is all about money and power. So, although the Jewish religion is. because
So we're on page 114. We're just kind of reading through the text. We're in small groups. And we are, well, it's not here. This is there. And we're just reading the text for understanding. And then those are the questions to kind of think about and kind of discuss. Yeah, of course. And there's cookies in there. Enjoy.
Whether it's discussing with other people. They never sound.
And very personal. From your own point of view.
Which I mean, is always good.
At least-
What did you thinking of it?
Yeah, I think I- yeah, of course, we get it.
Usually it tends to be, we all subscribe to the same mindset of how we.
I was curious about Passover. And I was doing some research and reading. And I also did, why did it take 40 years for the Jews to make an 11-day journey?
It took them a generation. It wasn't about the distance. It was because that were monitoring and to let their next generation be ready to go into the.
Because of the 12 spies that were sent into Canaan. And we're told to find out all about this and come back and report on it. And they were told to come back.
I think a lot of people would say for Arizona stuff, no, there's they just
Oh,
tie it back.
10 of them didn't.
Right.
And I got 8. And he said, well, that will take an entire generation to get that. And so that's why they wandered for 40 years in the desert, because they crossed over. They didn't follow the instructions. It's an interesting story.
See, that's why I thought it
What
was
about
a
number two?
man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. That's how you wrestle.
That was very nice. You know, it's like, well, where should I put this one? It's not that. Well, let's see what this really got.
I think you like the ability for us to.
Right.
And there is a healthy balance.
Right.
See that we're all saying the same thing.
Everybody thinks the
Right.
right is right. Number one, no one.
Right.
You know, that's what we got. You know, but I often through my life have wrestled with that. I know what it goes to be.
Yeah.
Others are I did this every day. So that was a lot. You know, I was on this outsider. But then when I got into it, I really need, you know, I was really to make a choice, you know, and so that's when I decided, you know, I need to go visit that. So that was a big business.
Sure, come on down.
How do you personally relate to wrestling with God? Do you feel wrestle? Yeah.
And the man roast was you had bad attitude. So he took it
But then like the Jacob's
Yeah, that's definitely, yeah.
And so
That's probably my. I mean, I grew up.
Meanwhile, the guy asked
That was a big thing for me that I just didn't really know. I don't realize. And I didn't have any.
We'll take like another 3 minutes and then we'll come back together.
It really depends on.
So you had a visual of.
I think there's an old guy having our head. You wrestle. You gotta wrestle. Who you wrestling with? You know, people. Which is right. Well, right. On the other end of the spectrum, there is no. There's a concept. There's a sense of the largeness of the universe. And we're a part of it. But there needs to put a name for something to look at.
All right, we are going to come back together. All right, so there is a lot, it's a small text, but there's a lot in here to unpack, right? So this text takes place where Jacob is returning to Canaan, which I think is the question you have been asking me, and I didn't realize. He's returning to Canaan after having left. He left after he stole the birthright from his brother. He's returning to his father Isaac after 20 years. And then this is what takes place. So everyone had a chance to read it. Based on this, what is your feeling about this first question? What does the fact that the Jewish people comes to be identified as Yisraelites, people who wrestle with God, tell you about Judaism as a religion? So while you're thinking of that, I'm going to give you an interesting fact. Go ahead, unless you have an answer.
It's always an entanglement. Trying to figure out which is the beginning, which is the end, what sticks out, what doesn't stick out. It's constant questioning. There is no definitive answer to what is an Israelite.
So one of the beauties of Judaism, right, is that, there's kind of no kind of formal dogma, aside from the belief in one God, right? Aside from that belief, people's beliefs vary in Judaism, which could be, on one hand, you could say, well, how can you have a religion that way? On the other hand, it kind of allows people to be Jewish, even if they don't have a specific and full understanding of God, and allows them to, constantly be thinking about God and be involved in this discussion. What is God? What is my relationship with God? And you don't have to have a final answer. You don't have to have a final answer when you're 10, when you're 20, when you're 50, when you're 80. Like, you never really have to have a final answer because your relationship with God changes as you change. Any other thoughts on that first one? It's a big question. Big question. Okay. How about how do you personally relate to the idea of wrestling with God? How does that sit with you? Does that sit well, this idea, or would you rather not have to wrestle with God? Have you ever thought of these questions? Some people haven't, like it's, yeah.
I would say, the way I read this, that it kind of be, differently, but to me, it's like wrestling with myself about the idea of God, as opposed to me physically wrestling with God, or like, as in, I feel like I'm the person I'm wrestling with, it's not like I'm wrestling with God himself.
Wrestling with yourself, not with God. Got it.
And so when I read it that way, I think of, like you just said, we're all constantly growing and changing, like, good things happen in our lives, bad things happen in our lives, and as they come to us, this idea of what you believe in God and this bigger picture keeps coming into play and we keep changing.
Right. Yeah. Great. Yeah.
I think that's what Ben's saying is right, that you wrestle with God at different times in your life, depending on what's happening.
Absolutely.
And I think you wrestle more with God and what he's done when you suffer a loss, when you can't figure out where you're going in life or why did this happen in life. Then I think all those questions about God and what do I believe about him, and I guess wrestling with God, why did you do this? If somehow you really think that, why did you do this? And then some years you just go right along and he goes right along with you. Like there's no wrestling.
Yeah, I think sometimes they're kind of this, God is like they're kind of dormant. And I do think that most times when people start to, wrestle with God is illness and loss, right? Because why did this happen to me, and trying to make sense of it. And that really then is this real wrestling with God. I mean, that real sense of wrestling and trying to make understanding. Patty.
So I also think of it as if you're in a static relationship that has no friction or no at odds, not in a negative way, but in a
Passive.
yeah, you have a relationship that doesn't grow. When you have a relationship that has some tension, it allows the opportunity for growth in that relationship where you can develop more in that relationship. So wrestling with God is a way of us working on improving our relationship with God too.
Yeah, and I love that it doesn't have to be seen as a negative, right? Wrestling with God doesn't have to be seen as a negative thing. It can get you like to another place, and it makes that relationship active. Yeah, that was great. Thank you. Any other thoughts?
The word wrestling is troubling to me.
Tell me why.
Because in today's context, I think of wrestling not over a decision. I'm like, debating or in my mind going back and forth. But when I have the word wrestling, I think of the sport and the aggression of the sport. And
Sure.
It's just not a word I would use when talking about boxing.
Because it's a really intense word. And I wonder, like we all know the idea behind it, but I wonder what other English word would it be? I'm not sure what the answer is. Like, I mean, engaged in debate, engaged in, But yeah, it's kind of like, it's like a harsh word in that sense. I totally get that. So that would be what makes you comfortable or uncomfortable with the idea of wrestling, possibly, or just the word itself?
It's the word. I don't have a problem with the, intimate conversation I'm having in my head with God. But I just, even though when I haven't agreed or been in the stats of what ridiculous that has passed, I don't think of that when I know I didn't when my mom passed. It wasn't that I was thinking that I was wrestling with God. I was searching for guidance or comfort. And maybe what I was searching for wasn't what God was willing to provide, but I never thought of it as a physical wrestling.
So can anybody think of another verb that might be a better choice? It's kind of difficult.
The only word that comes to mind for me is, it's along the lines of wrestling. It has to do with wrestling. It's like grappling, but that's like the same concept, grappling. the only other word coming to my head.
Mm-hmm.
It's like my personal relation of thinking of this and came to me after our discussion. Was like thinking about like my students when they're wrestling with a concept to understand or something new. Like you're wrestling with it, they're trying to find some understanding and how it's gonna relate to their own life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what this reminds me of. Like you wrestle with God and how he fits into your life. And that's kind of how I related to it, but it's like grappling as well, grappling with that.
And Kathy also, she suggested at odds, which is also a good one, at odds with God, right? That also, I think, captures it. And grappling, I also think captures it well. Maddie, did you want to say something?
I mean, the idea of wrestling, I'm not necessarily bothered by the word concept. If you think about actual wrestling, one, it makes it more personal, because you can, if you're actually doing a wrestling, you could be wrestling with a person, with a stranger, but by the time you are done wrestling with that person, you have learned a ton about them in that process, because it's actually a very
Intimate, yeah.
sport.
Mm-hmm.
So you learn about their body language, you learn about choices, you learn about how they're thinking about things, how they approach something. There are times where
So interesting,
one
yeah.
person is winning and then they get stuck for a minute and then nothing's happening and they're both trying to figure out where we go from here, and then you move and then it stops. So it's this whole process. So it just makes it more, because you can't wrestle with someone or be with someone or grapple with someone and not have an intense relational experience. So if anything, it makes the relationship itself more personal, because you can't wrestle with that if you don't have, like, you obviously have a kind of relationship with someone. So you can't wrestle with someone that you don't believe in or that you don't think is fair, because you're engaged in this process, if that makes sense. So
Yeah,
it makes it more personal.
When you were saying that, actually, the wrestling, it kind of made me thought it's like an intimate dance with God. A little this, a little that, right? Like, but what you were saying.
And it's a constant ongoing process.
Yeah,
It isn't something that's finite.
correct. It's a lifelong journey, lifelong process, the relationship with God. We are always in relation with God, right? Even if we don't realize it, or even if God is not on the forefront, we are always in relation with God. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, of course. Does everybody have a personalized view of God? You can't wrestle with thin air. So you have a personal view, like a personal, does God exist as a person for you?
Oh, as a person, not your personal theology, but as a person.
But as a person.
Got it.
Okay, because you can't wrestle. You're not really wrestling with an idea. It's analogous to wrestling in that you're turning and twisting and trying to pin things down or gain control, but how can you do that with thin air? You know, you can do it with a person if you had a personal concept of God, because then you're wrestling with that personal concept.
But sometimes people will say, like, are you wrestling with that idea?
Yeah.
So
Right, but this isn't the idea of God.
right.
It's God. So we've personalized it.
Mm-hmm.
We've created a picture. What is it? Anyone can tell you what God looks like. He's a old white man, unfortunately.
With a big gray beard,
and flowing robes.
Kind of looks like Santa Claus. Right. And then we get that from the movies, right? That's kind of like when we did that picture of like draw a Jew, right? Like,
yeah.
Right. You could have just been like, okay, this is what a Jew looks like, and this is what a Jew looks like. But no, everyone drew somebody wearing kippah, or you had to be wearing a talit, or you had to like be showing your Judaism when just like you're just a person and you're Jewish. You don't have to have any outward signs. So yeah.
So that idea of God being real,
Mm-hmm.
is it a mainstay for most people? Do you ascribe personal traits and have a picture? Some people shake their head no, some people yes.
So we're going to actually get to that as we're doing this. We're going to go to an exercise that actually has 49 different names of God, and some of those will elicit for you. Some are just like, you could think of God as the wind, the air, but some ascribe like as a father, and then you have one picture. You might see God as a warrior. So if you can just hold that, we're gonna get to that idea. That was great, though. Thank you.
I was gonna say that the Torah has a lot of verbiage for things that aren't actually physical or make sense. Like, you know, the cleansing period after you die, for instance, which is like described to be like sort of a pain or something like during the cleansing period, but it's not like actual physical pain. You don't have nerves and you're not actually going anywhere. You don't have a body anymore. So there are things that we don't really have words for. But when I think of wrestling, I think of like, what's the goal in a wrestling match? Is to subdue your opponent. But you know, for me personally, relating to the idea of wrestling with God, it's like, I'm not thinking of wrestling the old bearded white guys, you know, on TV from like the Ten Commandments or whatever. It's like when I don't have a picture, it's just like of the powers that be that I seem to can't control. I'm not able to control, and that's part of the wrestling match. It's like I want to. There are a lot of things I can control, but there are some things that eat me up inside. It's like why can I control that? You know, was there a way to be able to do that? Probably not, unless I had a bigger 50,000 foot view of everyone, my life and several other people's lives around me. So whether that was chaos theory of the dominoes dropping by or God's plan, that's what I wrestle. That's my wrestling match. And I'm not going to subdue that opponent, but maybe I'll try.
Right. And it's like you can't always get to an answer.
Yeah.
Right? But it continues the wrestling. But I think that's the important part, is we should just engage with God. We may not find an answer, right? And we probably won't necessarily always find an answer, but just the engaging with God keeps God present in our life. Somebody had a hand? No? Okay.
Rabbi,
Yes.
but isn't that what you said? Do we have a picture of God? Is he an old white man
Mhm.
or a body, a physical
Physical
body?
body.
Isn't that part of the difference between Judaism and Christianity? Being even though one God, if you go in, their body is their physical being is the body of Christ. Where we don't have any concept of that. It's not, certainly not the Torah.
Right.
Or the Bible. We just have this ethereal thing that there is somebody somewhere somehow has guided this earth all this time. And what really made me think about it is what a wonder it is to suddenly have a child within you. How does that actually happen? And then one day that child is out sitting in your lap, barfing all over you. I mean, but a lot of you haven't had children. But if you think about it in those terms, that is one of the most miraculous miracles that have to come from somewhere. I don't know, don't ask me where, because I can't tell you.
And Barbara, that's
thank you, Bonnie.
And that's what a lot of people will say, that to them shows that there's a God. The fact that humans can create a human being with all the science and technologies and robots, like, that you can create, the fact that a human being can be created by people shows that there's like a God in the world.
There is something there that you have to say, yes, it is. But again, when you're sick or when someone dies, you go, what the Sam Hill are you doing to me?
Mhm.
Why did you do this to me? And so it is a wrestling match of feelings, of thoughts.
Right.
Between yes, no, I don't know, I don't care, kind of thing.
And like you were saying, God doesn't live in a body, even though some people may think of God in a physical form, which is fine. We put anthropomorphic, words on God. That God is like a father, like a ruler, like all of the words that we're going to like go over in that exercise, because it is hard for us to think of God as an idea, right? It is easier to think of God as a person or as a savior or as a warrior, right? It's easier because we know what those things kind of look like, and we don't know what God looks like. It's like air. It's kind of like wind. You can't see wind, but when you see something moving, wind exists, right? That's like God.
But one of the things that you're doing is using a word or words.
Correct.
It to encapsulate
Yep.
the concept, and so again, you personalize it.
Right,
Everybody is, so far is personalized.
absolutely.
That, can you?
Go ahead. Yeah.
I understand what Barbara was saying when you say, when you go through hard times, you're like, where's God? Why, why didn't he hear my prayers, or he or she or they, but look at the bigger world picture right now.
Mhm.
So if anyone read the chapter on To Life, it talks about the Holocaust. So where was God?
Mhm.
Well, look at it where we are today,
Mhm.
in the Ukrainian situation. Why isn't God then? I mean, I could see where people who may not believe in the concept or the person would have a real hard time, because how can God let this happen?
Right. Yes, and that a lot of people, think like, and I've heard that before, and the only kind of like the Jewish response to it is that that's what happened when God gave us free will, right? When God gave us free will, unfortunately, people don't always choose good, right? And that God doesn't intercede and come down and stop it. But that is with the Holocaust. That is like what grapples people, and why people in the Holocaust, some people never could believe in God again, right?
What was the Christian?
I don't know. Does anybody else who has more knowledge about that want to answer me?
It's hard to plan, it's to get you to another place.
Yeah.
God, no, the token one is God brings you to your ultimate bottom so that you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Is what you should feel that sometimes you'll bring you through a really hard trial to restart the process. That's usually what's.
The way I was brought up with it, the people who participated in Holocaust, like, they're going to hell.
Mhm.
You're a good person, you're going to heaven.
Mhm.
That is how I was raised. You do something bad, like kill someone, you're going to hell. You may be forgiven, depending how you live the rest of your life, but ultimately, you are not going to see the light of day. Like, that is how I was raised.
Yeah.
So piggybacking on what.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that because I didn't know the answer. So thank you.
On what you were saying, I attended, I think this was one of our intern rabbis. He had kind of like a Torah study.
Lunch and learn?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And he had this exact same concept, which I had never heard of before. Like you're saying, humans have free will. And it's not that God is causing these bad things to happen. These things happen, or choices, and
Mhm.
people don't make great choices, all of that stuff. But God is there to provide us with strength to get through the hard times.
Mhm.
That's where God comes in, is to help lift us up and help us get through that tough time.
Mhm. And to provide, I like the word structure, to provide kind of a structure, something again to believe in. I mean, we had the whole class about faith, right? And it's hard. It's not easy when bad things happen, like the Holocaust or what's going on today in Ukraine. Really tough to believe in something. But that is when we kind of like need to look to God to like find some grounding, some meaning somewhere in life. Yeah, go ahead.
But there are references in the Bible to things that God does.
Yep.
Okay. I'm just explaining, I was looking up today, why did it take 40 years for the Jews to do an 11-day trip? To leave Egypt and go to Canaan, which is an 11-day trip. Why did it take 40 years?
Well, it wasn't the distance.
No,
It wasn't the distance. It had to wait till the generation died out.
so you had to wait for a generation to die out, because before they went into Canaan, they sent 12 leaders-
Spies. I know the
Spies,
spies.
they call them spies.
To scout out the land.
And come back and report. And the reports were supposed to be positive,
Right,
okay? 10 of them had negative reports.
correct.
Didn't think that God could actually provide them with Canaan, or to defeat the Canaanites and to take over that territory. And God got mad and said, no, none of these people will be able to go to the promised land. You're going to have to wander for 40 years out in the desert until they die off. The two that came back with positive reports actually did live long enough to go to the promised land. The other 10 all died. So it's not that God doesn't, he, at least in the stories, they have him doing things that,
Oh, there are things, I mean, God brought the flood and then God promised he would never, destroy the world again in a flood. So I just realized it is 8:15. I mean, this is obviously a topic we could talk about for hours on end. So great discussion. Like, I don't want to cut it short. So I'm just trying to kind of think of where I want to go. Oh, somebody's logging on, for us in the next 45 minutes. So I just really briefly, because there's some really good exercises that I want to make sure we get to. If you just turn in your text to 116. So this idea, like I said, Judaism doesn't have like a commonly agreed upon creed, right? That we all believe one thing, except this idea of monotheism, right? That there is one God. And that is that is in the Shema. Actually, we're not going to look at the Shema because we're going to do something else, but that's the prayer, right? We say morning and the night saying, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one," right? That is the basic. So that is a belief that you have to have in Judaism, right? You have to believe in one God. What that God is, how that God acts, how you interact with that God, that's kind of up for grabs. And then this idea that on 116, that God is both transcendent, right? Something bigger than us, and God is, immanent, something that like is involved with us in the everyday. And regardless of your theology, it basically involves both of these, right? Sometimes it could involve one more heavily than other, but in general, most theologies have a balance between these two elements. So we're not going to go over page 117, but this is something to look at. So this is the prayer Adon Olam, which is the way we conclude every service. So in it, it's split up that the top is transcendent and the bottom is this idea of this immanent relationship with God. So when you have some time, take a look through this. Read the English, see the change that occurs, and just kind of think to yourself, like, why do you think the poet kind of radically changed tones? What point was like the poet trying to communicate about, our relationship with God? And the third thing to think about, and if you have any questions when you do that, just let me know. And the third thing is really like, why is this the prayer or the song that we chose to end every service with, right? It's not just by chance that we are ending our service with this idea of this balance of like transcendence and immanence, right? It was chosen for a reason. They could have ended the service with a lot of things, right? But there's a reason that like we decided it's important that we kind of like, always remember this balance of the two. And again, it doesn't have to be a 50-50 balance, but there's always a balance of those two. Something to keep in your head as we turn to page 118. All right, so Steve, this is what I was talking about, the exercise, okay? 49 names of God. There are some of these names are names you will recognize, you hear all the time, maybe in a Siddur, or when we've been speaking. Some you will have never heard, and some are really not used. But what I'd like you to do is to take a little bit of time, really read through the list, put a check by 5 names. There may be more, but really try to figure out the 5 that you feel most comfortable with and that actually creates some meaning for you. Put an X by 5 that you don't feel comfortable with, or that when someone says that is not God to you, right? Just really holds no connection to you. And a question mark by 5 names that surprised you, or you don't really understand. You just don't really understand why is that a name ascribed to God. So those directions are at the top of 118. Let's take maybe like 5-6 minutes or so, do that, and then we're going to do a little bit of sharing in groups. So you read through the whole list once and then go back a second time and do all the checking off. take like another minute. See if you're able to finish up. All right, so what I'm gonna have you do now is I want you to find someone, see if you can find somebody who you haven't maybe spoken to or had a chavruta before with. You're gonna partner with them, and then there's some guiding questions on 119, you know, that you might wanna just think about as you're sharing in your chavruta. So let's kind of take that, let's maybe give like 6 or 7 minutes to that, and then we're going to come back and have like a bigger group discussion. So find someone you haven't partnered with yet. You want to come with us? If we're not a fully even number, somebody can have 3, however you want to, you feel most comfortable. So. So for Heidi, Kathy, and David, even though you're not talking with somebody and you can't do the first question on 119, the bigger thing to kind of think about on your own even is look at the names you chose, see if there's any similarities, any trends that you can pull out. This is what our next discussion is kind of going to be. Like, is there a common theme of the ones that you happen to like, or a common theme in the ones you don't like, that spoke to you, that didn't speak to you, and maybe what those might help you decide about your personal theology. Meaning, for example, like some of the ones maybe are things that involve nature, that might think that you see God more as like a natural view in the world or something like that. So just try to see within your own ones that you chose, and there may be no pattern and no trend, and that's totally fine as well. Okay.
What do you say? Just so. But he can do it. And so, all things that you say yourself are so Is it just like? Free will.
I never knew that.
Yes. He was president. Said he was president. Was he? Did he do it first? What were you saying?
We'll take like 3 more minutes, okay? 3 more minutes.
Never been there before. He has nothing to do with it. Never knew how to run it. So what else was so there's creative reality. No, my wife is all 50.
I know my
So for 50 years. She didn't say, I wanted to know what more about this.
So we'll take one more minute, so let's try to wrap up your discussions.
Not because I found it buffer home. And this is the part.
Okay,
Although I know.
all right. So there was a lot of great discussion. I can hear little bits and pieces of things. So it's quite a list, these 49 names. Are there some that you've heard, some that you haven't heard before on this list?
Sure.
Okay, so let's just jump in. For whatever group you were in, you know, what kind of things did you guys have in common? Or did you notice a trend in the names you picked or that your partner's names picked? And we'll just get it going from there. You know, it's something really like, you know, hit you that you really liked, or something that really like just was like, I just cannot, you know, that name just doesn't work for me. However you want to do the discussion, we'll go from there.
So I think for both of us, we like the ones that were more like our God, our Lord, Shepherd, you know, more like compassionate terms. And then we both kind of struggled with, you know, man of war and master of armies and king of kings, like the terms that had more of like negative connotation of like worldly, human, and power hungry.
So one of the kind of pattern was compassionate names, kind of were more quality, and then what was the other you termed it as?
We turned it as negativeness, like the nothingness, like referring to God as nothingness or a master of armies. So to us, those are more painting and God in a negative way.
They're just very aggressive.
Yeah, very.
Maybe aggressive.
To me, they were like earthly, they were more, you know, human-like, and I don't think.
The ones that you
Yeah.
chose were more earth-like. So which,
Yeah.
could you tell us which ones those were?
Well, like king, father, master of armies, the man of war.
So yeah, something more like a human, like that you could like more envision kind of.
Yeah, but and like she said, in more of a negative, you know, tone.
Yeah.
So yeah, those were both we didn't resonate with those.
Great, thank you. What were, yes?
I think one of the commonalities between us was the idea of being for everybody and not just us. So like our God being our God, not just
Like a communal
communal.
God? What are, tell me some others that you picked for that.
Ein Sof, like the infinite, because it transcends time. So
Mhm.
it's us, it's our ancestors.
We didn't like the one that said my soulmate.
Tell me why.
Like, the same concept, like this idea that God is for everybody, we all have our own ideas. I don't like it as my soulmate.
So this communal God really called to both of you, it sounds like much more.
Yeah.
That's really interesting because I read our God and my God. And I was like, what is the difference between those two? Like I didn't pick that out at all.
Yeah. We also realized we stayed away from like terms that are more associated with like Christianity, like the Savior, number 17. Like referring to him as the Savior, just as that's
Terms that didn't sound Jewish.
Yeah.
What else might have fallen into that category?
Well, for me personally, it's different than like Rebecca's, but for me, number 27, our shepherd. Reminds me of Jewish, well, or not Jewish, Christianity.
Got it.
And what one were you saying?
22, eternal judge,
Because eternal, for what reason eternal judge?
Well, because it's not whether we're going to heaven or hell.
Yes.
I think trends that we found for both of us, even though we had drastically different names for ones that were meaningful to us, is she had picked ones that were pretty much seen throughout the Torah service, like names of God that are repeatedly said over and over again. And mine, some of them on the same that like didn't resonate because they remind me too much of Christianity, but other ones were names of God that were in some of my favorite hymns growing up in my life that still resonate with me that way. So in a sense, it's still tradition and familiarity, but we had completely different words under that same view. So it went
Love
with
that.
tradition and repetition and familiarity.
And I was the same way as Karen. I pretty much picked a lot of the same ones that I hear in service every day, because that's where I'm currently at, and what I'm used to so far in the past 6 months of in service. That's now like my Jewish terms of referring to God, because that's what I hear every single week. So.
Great. And if you notice, there's a lot of different trends, right? I mean, like, it's great, Barbara.
Well, one of my trends, it was the words I hear in services but the other one there.
But Barbara, is that because it's tradition and familiarity?
It's
Okay.
those are the things, but the one that we did not care for, which you hear all the time in other parts of conservative reform and Orthodox, is Hashem. That did not care for Hashem, the name.
You know what's so interesting? It's the one name. There's other names that I just, I don't hear that are weird, but Hashem also is such like, for me, and this is gonna sound terrible, because for people who say it, it's fine. It says nothing for me because it doesn't resonate. It's not how I grew up. It's really something that is more used in the Orthodox setting, but the name just doesn't do it for me. Now, the reason they use Hashem, though, is because they don't want to use the name of God in vain, right?
Correct.
So it's kind of, they just say the name. It's, to me, it's kind of just feels like a placeholder, but they're using it because they don't want to say the name of God in vain. But the fact is, we're not taking the name of God in vain because this is not really God, right? This is just another way to refer to Yod He Vav He, which is what God's name is, which we don't know how to say it. But that also, Hashem always strikes a chord with me. I don't know why.
Which is a placeholder, or there should just be an asterisk by it. It's an asterisk.
Parentheses, fill in the blank.
Okay, good one.
So funny. I mean, people do, you have like a visceral reaction to, some people just certain names.
It feels like you're putting God like another degree of separation from him.
In which word? Hashem. Yeah.
So one that was kind of opposite for us was I liked the hidden one.
Where is that one? I'm just looking.
LD star 41. I like that one, and you get circle that. To me, when I think about that, because God to me is like the concept of electricity. He's not there, you can't see it, but it's always there. It's always present. So hidden to me, the hidden one is that same concept.
Got it.
And it felt hidden was that he's not accessible.
Oh, interesting. It's amazing. The same name can really have that reaction for people, right? Completely different reactions. Any other thoughts when you saw this? Maddie?
Just like you were saying how you had picked things that were our God, our Father, because it seemed for everyone, but like for me, I think the beauty of God is that he's everyone's God at the same time, but there's that capacity that he can be soulmate and my God, like I have, or like even in the Torah service where there's prayers that everyone is doing together as a whole people, but then there's sections for individual that we can be or hear it or whatever.
Right.
Is all of those things at the same time.
Yeah, it can be communal and can be personal at the exact same time. Absolutely.
It's interesting that nobody has mentioned at all about the word peace.
Was that one of them?
Yeah, number 46, but nobody ever.
You did pick that one, Jen?
I did pick that.
Hmm.
Did you say Shalom?
Oh, I
She didn't say it,
out
but-
here, but it's on my page that was.
Oh, okay, but it wasn't part of the initial discussion.
Did you pick that, Bunny, or
Yes, I did.
it's something you like or don't like, or,
It was something I liked.
and why does that name for God called to you?
I think because it's like the ultimate goal, and God to me is an ultimate, wherever, whatever. whatever. I don't know that we'll ever attain it, but we should never give up on it.
Mhm.
What's the difference then between maker of peace and shalom peace? Maker of peace
Shalom
is
is up to,
38.
Shalom, although it's on the list of names of God, I consider Shalom more universal that everybody should be using, whereas maker of peace designates an individual. In my,
It's a difference
thought
between us
process.
that has shalom and shalom.
So to me, maker of peace means that there wasn't peace prior.
Hmm.
Right.
Interesting.
To make it. Whereas peace is one that I checked also, because I like this idea that even when there's perfect peace, like that is God at work. There
Hmm.
wasn't prior conflicts or there's not future conflicts. That is the perfect state of contentment and that's maybe what makes.
Well, and like God is peace itself. Like, not only does he make peace, like he is. He's like, oh, like he, whatever peace is, like he is that.
That is God, the embodiment of God or something. So this is something that that I'm going to have you reference. Like, so one of the things that I want you to do when you go home is to think about, which we're going to get to there, what your theology is, right? So how you view God on this page, the ones you chose, the ones you didn't chose, the ones you're not sure about, right? These, even as you're speaking, I can already, obviously I don't know all of your theologies, but it's already telling me a little bit how you're thinking and how you're thinking and how your view of God, right? Because whether, you know, a human like God calls more to a communal God, a personal God, right? A compassionate God, an aggressive God doesn't or does, you know, words that maybe you chose or you think about God because that's tradition, familiarity with you. These words, you'll see when you think about further will affect what, you know, what your theology, they're helping you actually to create your own theology of God and what works for you. So, you know, definitely, you know, maybe bookmark that page because you're going to be coming back to that page. So one of the interesting things here is that, you know, there's this idea of like lefi kocho, to each his own, or each in his own way. And like, that's kind of what this list is, right? These are 49 names of God. Not one of them is right and not one of them is wrong, but we all feel differently, you know, about them because that's really how God is. God is really each person according to his or herself is how God is for you. And the example in the book that they use on the bottom of 119, you know, is this example, you know, God's speech came to each individual according to their own capacity, which is really like the fikoho, according to your own. Do not be surprised at this. When the manna descended for Israel, it tasted differently to everyone. Why? Because the manna tasted something to you. Maybe you love chocolate chip cookies and you love pizza and you love steak, right? Like it tasted because it came to us for however we came to it. That's with God, right? There's no wrong, right or wrong. It's just how you come to God. And as we talked about, you know, over your lifetime, your connection and your interactions with God are different depending on, you know, where you are in life, and we grow and we change in life, and our personal theologies also grow and change. There will probably always be like a, you know, something similar in your theology, but it definitely changes and I think, you know, matures as we continue to experience life and grow. So that's something to also think about when you will be working on your theology, that whatever you work on doesn't have to be your theology for all time. It should be constantly changing and growing because, again, this whole idea of Yisrael, we're constantly wrestling, engaging, grappling at odds, all the things we've been talking about with God, which will affect our theologies. So one thing that I want you guys to start to take a look at is on page 122 and 123. So these are 6 rabbis. I know 4 of them. I've heard of 5 of them, but I know 4 of them. And they're 100-word theologies, right? And this is what you are going to try to create. You are going to try to create your own 100-word theology, which does, you know, 100 words is a lot, but it's not so much, right? So you kind of have to really kind of this idea of wrestling, right, with this idea of God to kind of come up with what your own theology is. So what I'd like to do is to have you start to read that. You'll do this by yourself, and whatever you write is also going to be personal. Well, we won't take the time today, but it's something that I'd love for you to do at home, to write your own theology. But to start today, start reading through these and kind of underline, a phrase, a sentence that really resonates most strongly to you, right? Kind of like in each one, as many as things as they say that resonate to you, start to underline, because these may be pieces that you see are part of your own theology, which you may not have even been able to express, but when you read it, you're like, that's me. This is how I see God. This is how I believe in God. So let's just take some time to start, digesting kind of what they wrote and underlining. And then we're just gonna go around afterwards, and we'll have you share like one phrase or sentence in whoever's theology that resonated with you. But the personal theologies are your own. I'm not gonna look at them. I'm not gonna ask you about them. Those are your own. So let's just start, and however many you get to is fine. And then I have some announcements before we finish today. So that's on page 122 and 123. All right, so I know you may not have had a chance to read all of them, but let's go around and you can say whichever one it is, which rabbi, and just one line that really kind of resonated most strongly with you. And if you notice, these theologies are very different. There's some, threads that are similar, but they're vastly different. And it's interesting because for people that I know reading these theologies, some of them I'm like, yeah, that's definitely you. Like, it really works. I mean, so Jen, do you want to start us off?
Oh.
Sorry, I know you're reading.
Tell me again. What you
Yeah. Just like one phrase or sentence, doesn't matter from who's, one phrase or sentence that really kind of just like resonated most strongly with you. You don't have to tell us why, just one that resonated really with you in like kind of how you maybe see God or think of God.
The one under Rabbi Daniel Rottenberg, I've had powerful experiences of transcendence that as I interpret them, substantiate my sense of divine as a vast interconnectedness of all being, and maybe more than that. But am I right? I'll never be sure.
Great. I think a lot of us probably think of that, right? Am I right? Who knows? Thank you. Great. Go ahead.
Okay, so I think we're really similar theologies. I also picked that one, but I picked a different sentence. So the sentence that I highlighted was, we must engage theology with humility and an awareness that things may be messy and complex as we try to make sense of ultimate reality through a deeply subjective place. It just kind of like God is like this abstract concept.
Mhm.
But I also kind of resonated with Rabbi Eli's that's a little bit, if I can elaborate a little.
Yeah, which part?
There's one sentence where he says, I pray to you each day as an act of discipline and a way to make time for our relationship. So I think just coming from a place where I was maybe a little bit more agnostic and then finding my way to Judaism, I just really like how there's all these like traditions that, deepens your relationship with God.
I love it. Thank you. Yeah, and you can choose. I mean, if you want to pick two sentences from two different wherever, that's also fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, from Rabbi Clickfeld, I like the whole passage there, really, but just that God is a commanding voice, and he commands us universally to care for the earth and her inhabitants. That spoke to me, as well as living a Jewish life and with mitzvot. And we're, living that life, staying committed, I like this comment that we fail at it almost as much as we succeed, so even as we try to be good people in general, sometimes it's always a battle. So that really spoke to me. I liked how, we stay committed to our bonds with God because it's dear, and we believe that God was at Mount Sinai, and more importantly, we were there.
So this theology really, like a lot of it really spoke to you. Wow. Great, wonderful. Look, you already put it into words, your theology. That's great.
Yeah, you're right.
That's great. No, but it's also kind of nice when you read something that resonates with you, because sometimes it is hard to put into words what we feel and what we think. But when you read it, it hits like a core, hits a spot in you. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I like the first line from Rabbi Deborah Silver.
Mm-hmm.
I continue to fall in and out of relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
A word I dislike would be too small.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Stephanie.
Mine is two different. One is Rabbi Rutenberg.
Mm-hmm.
The last sentence. I'm always suspicious of those who claim certainty or that they have all the answers, and that comes from a Christian perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and then the other one is Rabbi Klingfeld.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in God.
So such a small little statement, right? But says so much. Great, thank you, Patty.
I wasn't expecting any one of these to just like grab me, but the Rabbi Spitz, that entire theology just was like meant for me. I mean,
wow.
All of it was just, it was just a perfect fit.
That's great. I love it.
Is more grounded in emotion and intuition than analytic thought. So it's not that this relationship is something that we are supposed to analyze and come up with concrete ways to describe it, but it's more of an emotional connection and a feeling of the connection that I have with God, and it's just we do rituals as a part of having it, putting some kind of concrete form to that relationship, but ultimately it's still an intangible relationship. But the ritual gives it some structure that we can operate in because we're tangible beings, so we need something to, operate in. But ultimately, it's not concrete, it's intangible.
Great, I love that. Wonderful, thank you, Barbara.
I like everything that Rabbi Rosenberg said, but the first sentence is, I just think that's great. My theology is, I don't know.
It's very honest.
Because I think that's, and I have read these before,
Mhm.
but I think that that's everything that has been expressed by every person. If you go all the way down from all of everything is, I don't know. I don't know. I obviously, if I get you're a rabbi or a cantor, there has to be some level of, I do know. And the other one that I like was, I believe in both the God my head tells me about, and then, excuse me, and then my heart feels.
Which one is that?
Rabbi Hirschfield.
Mm-hmm.
That I just believe both the God my head tells me about and that my heart feels. And that's two different. Your head says one thing, but your heart and services says something.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Bunny, you're next.
I have two individual, the first one was Rabbi Daniel Rotenberg. My theology also is, I don't know. And I'm still there. And I still don't know. But then at the end for Rabbi Ellie Spitz, I do believe that you are the consciousness embedded in all that exists, uniting and guiding. I just haven't found it yet.
Great, I love it. Great, thank you.
So I really connected or like Rabbi Adam Klingfeld. And I also, I mean, I underlined a few sentences there, but then I also, Rabbi Ellie Spitz, which Bunny just said, the last line, I do believe that you are the consciousness embedded in all that exists, uniting and guiding. It's just, like, I like the word infinite for it. I just like, it just kind of summed it up.
It just resonated with you. Great. Good, Jennifer.
So along with Bunny and Jackie, I also have picked the you are the consciousness embedded in all that exists. But I also chose from Rabbi Klingfeld, the voice commands us universally to care for Earth and her inhabitants. Just my entire view and my theology, it's always been embedded more in just like the creation of Earth. And sometimes when I'm like driving down and the sky's really blue and the clouds, that's where I really find like, okay, like this is amazing, like what we live in. Or when Rabbi Klingfeld talks about the inhabitants, I don't think of just the people. Like that refers to me to like animals, just everything, trees, just everything. But I also had a line from Rabbi Hirschfield. I kind of cut this sentence and highlighted, I believe that God has a plan. That stuck to me. I do think that there is a plan in place, we just don't know it and aren't meant to know it.
Great, love it. These are great, thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
I really liked Rabbi Daniel Rotenberg's start to finish, but I think one that really stuck out to me is we try to make sense of ultimate reality from a deeply subjective place. I think that's a really prevalent concept, and especially in today's world where we all have these really subjective ideas of reality and assessments of reality. And this idea that God kind of connects all of us and transcend that subjectivity is something that I think would be a lot of people to learn.
Thank you, Christopher.
So I like a lot of them. I don't think one really spoke to me the most. It was a couple from Rabbi Creditor and Rabbi Rotenberg I liked, but probably the sentence I would go with is from Rabbi Hirschfield. I believe in both the God whom I turn to for help in moments of pain and in gratitude in moments of joy, and in the logical absurdity and offensiveness of that God saving me while leaving others to suffer. I believe in God, in both the God my head tells me about and that my heart feels. There's a lot of that one, but
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot in all of these. There's a ton.
they all kind of spoke to me, but that's just one I picked that I like the most, but there was,
There's like pieces in all of them. Great, thank you. Maddie.
I went with actually the very first sentence, and that is the collective potential of the human imagination, connected with Ruttenberg's our understandings reflect the independent cultures through which we walk.
Great, thank you. Karen.
And seems to be a popular one under Gutenberg. Our understanding reflects the imperfect filters through which we view the world. I'm always suspicious of those who claim certainty or that they have all the answers.
Yeah, great, thank you. Thank you all for sharing. Like, it's very personal stuff, so I appreciate it. And I hope that, you know, reading this and kind of the exercise we did on the names of God and kind of thinking about it all will help you as you kind of go and work on, you know, your own theology. So at some time when you can carve out some personal time for yourself, that I encourage you to really, you know, work on that. And I have two announcements, and one may be a perfect time for you to work on this, since you already carved out this time. So we are actually not going to meet next Wednesday. Rabbi Wolk was going to teach the class, and we just didn't realize it was not good, like error of like the night before Passover. But since you normally, yeah, I mean, that probably wasn't the best planning, but since you normally carve out that time, if you don't write the theology before then, maybe you'll do it during then, unless you're cleaning for Passover. That's one announcement. The second announcement is Temple Israel is having a Seder on the second night. If you haven't seen the announcement, but I just wanted to remind you, if you are interested, the deadline is this Friday. So if anybody does want to sign up, you know, if you want to sign up, if you know somebody that wants to sign up, the deadline is this Friday. And so I will wish you all a happy Passover, Chag Sameach. Have a wonderful Passover. Enjoy the Seders. If you've never been to a Seder, I definitely would love to hear how it goes and what you thought, aside from the model Seder last week. Love to hear how it goes and everything. And just really have a wonderful Passover, and I will see you in a few weeks. Oh, and one more thing. We will make up that class, so please add it to your calendar, June 29th, the last Wednesday. You're not here? Is that okay?
I'll have my family here, maybe.
If you can't make it, I understand. I mean, I know it was before I told you the change, but if you can, great. And yeah, have a great night, everybody. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night. Bye, everybody. Have a great, happy Passover. Bye-bye.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.